Last year, I spent most of the year figuring out my workflows and processes creating content consistently. Part of that was figuring out what tool to use to manage my content calendar, Airtable or Notion. I ultimately decided on Notion for content planning and talked about that in a previous video that you can check out in the description. I still want to show what I ultimately built in Airtable and how you can build out your own content calendar in Airtable. You can build along with me in this video and or grab a copy of this Airtable content calendar template in the description. So without further ado, let's jump into Airtable and build a content calendar. So here we are in Airtable, and we are going to make 3 new tables in this blank Airtable base. So you can see I just created a new base in Airtable and it has table 1 and just the pre-standard fields that you get when you create a new base in Airtable. I'm just going to delete these fields really quickly. So we're just going to delete these because we don't need them, and we're going to keep them there. The very first table that we are going to create is the content table, and this is probably the most valuable table that's in this template. So I'm going to rename it as content. I'm going to rename this as idea, and this will make more sense in just a bit. So idea is going to be the main one, and then the next field I'm going to create is post date. So this is when it's going to be going out and published out to the world. You can include the time zone and time. I'm probably going to do that because actually if you're creating some formulas and things like that, sometimes time zone can make things a little finicky. And then use the same time zone for all collaborators. Because I'm in the time zone, I'm just going to pick New York to be safe. So there's that and post date. The other thing's a little more nitpicky. You don't necessarily have to. There's post date, record date. Now, this is something, it might not be that helpful for you, but for me, it's helpful just to kind of schedule out how am I creating content? When are things getting recorded? And this is really important, especially if you are batching content, which I highly recommend if you're creating content consistently. So there's that, display time zone, all the same fields like for that. So there's post date, record date in there. All right, the next status or the next field that we're going to create is status. And what I like to do here is create just a single select, like what is the status of this? So this might be, for me, it's usually, this is an idea, it's on deck. It's going to be writing. The next one is usually that this is record ready and recorded and then needs edit and then scheduled and posted. So those are the statuses that I personally use. Again, you can change this to whatever you like. This is just a template. Idea is like, this is just like, hey, I had this idea in the shower or wherever I might be, like, on a run. I just kind of will jot things down really quickly into the same place I manage all of the content. So that way, when I'm selecting which ideas I want to actually create the content around, that everything is one place. I can just really quickly like, oh yeah, I really like that idea. I still really like that one. Or you know what, I don't like that anymore. So I'll just kind of put it in just back into the ideas category. It's a really nice, just a one-stop shop for catching all the different types of content that you want to create or potentially want to create in the future. And also just, it keeps the pressure off you in terms of how much content or when you need an idea and on which content you want to create, because you already have ideas kind of flowing whenever. And, as you go throughout the year or just like throughout time, ideas come to you, you have a conversation with someone, you see this other piece of content on Twitter, wherever it might be. Like you can just kind of create a one-stop shop for all of your ideas and also creating content. So that's why I have idea. On deck is actually on the calendar. Writing, I'm actually writing the blog post or writing the script for it. Record ready is like, hey, this thing's ready for me to jump in front of a camera and we're going. Record is like, I jumped in front of the camera, it's recorded, I just need to edit. Needs edit is pretty self-explanatory. Scheduled is that this might be in buffer or this might be on a YouTube, like scheduled out to go out. And then posted is like, hey, this thing's already out in the wild. It's live and everyone can see it. Okay, so that's status. Platform. Now, this might not be important if you're just focused solely on one platform, but this is a really good habit still to get into because eventually you probably will be going to different platforms. So what I have done is that I'm focused really on 2 main ones, maybe 3 if you really want to. But doing a single select, and then I would do YouTube and Instagram as my 2 main ones. You could also include TikTok. And because they're shorts and everywhere, what you could do instead of a single select, just a multi-select. So what I'll do is create a multi-select instead. Okay, so there's platform. Now, for YouTube, titles are really important. So what I've actually done here is create, it's called YT title. And so what I've done is single line text. And then here you can actually put the title of what's the title that you're going to use for YouTube. Because idea and like what you think of the idea and YouTube title are probably 2 different things. You don't necessarily want to just be like whatever first title pops in your head to be the YouTube title. So I've separated those two things. Now that we have this YouTube title field, what I'm going to do is actually create a character counting field. So what I'll do is call it YT character or car count. And what it's really important for this, right, is because YouTube eventually at a certain character length actually starts cutting off your title, where if you're just kind of browsing in YouTube, you can't see the full title. So I like to know is it how many characters is in it? So it makes that like that fit. It's like 55 characters in it. If it's below that, you're safe. So what I like to do is just have that count going. So that way I know, is it too lengthy? How short is it? It's just a really good check to make sure you're having good titles. So to do that, what you have to do is create a formula field. And it's this length string here. So if I do len, and then if I do the YT title, so YT title, close the parenthesis, and then you can see it creates a count. So if I do hi world, you can see it updates that character count in here. It's a little slow, but it works. So now I have this YouTube character count, and the next thing I like to have is this attachment field, and this to be the thumbnail, right? So a lot of people, will suggest you to have in YouTube to really focus on your titles and thumbnails, and I highly recommend doing that as well. But in your thumbnails, right, is like you can actually attach them here in Airtable. So the beauty of Airtable, and one of the perks that when I'm trying to like convince people that Airtable is a good tool to be in, is that it's a one-stop shop for everything that you're doing in processing workflows. You don't have to be in Google Drive or this and that. Everything can be living in Airtable. So if you have the thumbnail here, again, it makes everything is here in Airtable. So that's why I have the thumbnail. I'll put it here in Airtable rather than like a folder on my computer or on like in Google Drive somewhere. It actually lives right here on Airtable. And also you can create a really cool gallery view if you'd like to at some point as well of all your different thumbnails, and you can see kind of what your channel looks like right here in Airtable versus like actually seeing it in YouTube, which is cool. The next field that we're going to create is a little more complicated, and this is more just a personal preference. So what I like to do is create two different documents. One is what I call a prep doc, and the second one is what I call a script doc. So the prep doc is like all the different research and maybe just kind of bullet point notes of everything I was kind of thinking about for this particular video. And this is like a living document as I'm going through prepping ideas and things like that. This is really cool, especially if you're batching content, is that as you're building content calendars and you're like, oh, this is a really cool idea. And you know what, this content idea, or I saw this tweet, or whatever it might be, whatever ideas I'm having for a particular video, as I'm going throughout time, I can just be throwing stuff into my prep doc. It's just kind of like this messy brainstorming doc. That's what I call my prep doc. Now, in Airtable, right, there's no native documents like you have in like a Notion, so you have to create a document of some sort in Airtable in a different way. The nice thing is that Airtable has a really cool new automation that creates an automatic Google Doc. So what I'll do here is actually have it so it's a link. And you see here it's a URL, create the field, and now I have this prep doc field. Now I'm gonna do the same thing for the script doc. So scripts, and then URL here. Now, if you want, you can create a button here too. So what you could do here is have a new field, and then scroll down to button. And what you can do then is actually pick the URL field. So actually what I can do is do prep doc, and then what do you want it to look like? So I want it to maybe look like this. And then it says prep doc here, button or something, whatever you might be. And then what it'll do is actually just put when there's a actual link here. So if I do like linkedin.com, you can see that it actually goes blue, and that's a clickable button, which is really nice. So then you just hide this field and you're good to go. So I'm going to clear this because we're going to need this in just a second. Now I have prep doc here, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a new button for the script doc. So script doc button. So there's that script doc, and I want this one to be orange. Okay. So you can see now I have a prep doc, script doc, and actually the nice thing too is you actually can change the label. So I'll have prep doc here, and then I'll have a script here, script doc. Okay. So you can see really nice and clean, and you can tell whether or not you actually have documents in these two fields, and you can actually just hide these after a while too. I'm not going to hide them just yet, but we will in just a moment. The last few fields I want to create in this table is one is sub count. So I like to keep track of like how many subscribers I might have in YouTube for each video. So at the very end of me closing out an idea, or let's say the video got posted, I'll go ahead and actually check how many subscribers I have on YouTube. So if I ever want to plot that of like which videos might have done better, or maybe like hey that I can see the growth in my YouTube subscriber account, I can do that right here in Airtable. And It's a little bit cumbersome. There's probably ways to automate it, but for now, what I've done, I've just put it manually. It's a nice, just kind of close it up in terms of that. So there's that sub count. And the other thing you can do, which I haven't done a lot of yet, but I think it's really helpful, especially to kind of see what content is performing better, is actually tagging their content in terms of what types of content it is. You don't want to be just doing content just like, hey, whatever you're feeling like that day. You want to be really prescriptive and really intentional about the content that you're creating. So for me, it would be like multi-select here, and then it might be like Airtable and Notion and Webflow and Ghost and like whatever tools I might be thinking about, or like, hey, this is me asking for something. And every time, like if let's say this is like an Airtable video and I'm comparing Notion together, I can tag them and actually then see, I can actually eventually, right, you have all these different content pieces that you've done and be able to compare and do some data analysis of like, hey, which content's actually doing better? Oh, I've done way too much Airtable content in this past year. You can measure all of that if you're tagging the type of content that you're doing, which is really, really cool. So these last two fields are much more for data and like reviewing things eventually. So if you're just getting started in your content game, it's okay. This definitely isn't the priority. Like definitely get this first part of it down. But eventually, right, you want to be able to do things analytically, do things really importantly, and do things that are, kind of diverse but also focused. Now we have all of the fields in this particular table here in this content calendar template, but there's still two things missing, and that is the prep doc, actual prep doc, and the script doc, right? These are just empty fields. We need these to be filled when we're actually creating the content. To do this, though, we have to create a native automation right in Airtable for creating a Google Doc. And what we're going to do is that when the status changes to on deck and there's actually a post date, then it's actually going to create this Google Doc template that you can type in, add things, and do whatever you would do in a Google Doc. Now, before I jump into the actual automation, what I'm going to do is actually clear these empty records out and actually just create like a basic idea. So let's say like Airtable content calendar. The post date is going to be, let's say it's today. Let's say record date is Monday, whatever it was. And then on deck is going to be this. Platform is going to be YouTube. YouTube title is Airtable content calendar. And then you can see, right, it's a little bit slow, but it does get it going eventually. You can see the character count. Thumbnail, I'm not going to worry about for now. We'll leave these empty because these are what we're going to fill with the automation. These will light up. And then sub count and tag are for post once it's posted. So no need to worry about this. Well, actually, scrap that. Air tags we do because we're going to check it as Airtable because we already know that. Okay, so now that we're good there, let's go into the automations. When record matches conditions, go to content, and then conditions will be when post date is not empty and status is on deck. All right, so we're good there. Then we'll choose the record, and you can see this pops right up because that matches those particular conditions. So there's that. Add an action, and you can see here's all the basic Airtable automations, but we scroll down and you'll see this Google Docs. We want to create a Google Doc. Now, I'm not going to set it up fully because that takes a little bit of time, but what I'll do, and don't want to forsake of time and just you watching this, you don't need to see all that. So what I'm going to do is create this Google Doc here. I'll tag it with my Google Doc account. I'm not going to select the folder because that would require me to sign in and whatnot. And then title is going to be, this is really cool because you can make it dynamic. So what I can do here is actually do the idea if I want, and then a prep doc. So whatever the idea is, right? So in this case, it would be Airtable content calendar prep doc. So I would know if I'm in my Google Drive, I'm like, what is all this? I actually can tell really quickly what it is. Now, if you have a really good process, maybe a checklist of like, hey, here's the things I need in a prep doc, you can do that. For simplicity's sake, I'm just going to follow the same method we just did in the title. So it's this and prep doc. Now, what you can do is simple formatting. So it's like bold. That's all you can do. There's not a lot of formatting that you can do just yet in this automation, which is kind of a bummer, but it's still, you have this automation. Now, we have this Google Doc created, and then after this, you can pick which orientation you want. We can test it if we want, but we're not going to do that. And so let's say we can create that Google Doc, but we want that Google Doc then to be linked back into Airtable. To do that is actually add an action here. We'll do that, update the record. And what we want to do is select the same content and the record idea that we're actually editing. So it's this record ID. And then the fields we want is like, because we're creating a prep doc, so we'll go to prep doc here, do this. And then we want it to be that link that we created. So you see, here's the records that's conditioned. So this is this first part of it. And then this part is this Google Doc part. So I'll go to Google Docs and then the file URL. And that's it. That's the entire automation. It's simple, easy. And every time then that the post date's on empty and the status is on deck, it just automatically creates this prep doc. So we'll do this. We'll do rename it as prep doc creation. And you can like add a description too. So like, actually I'll do that for now, is add a prep doc when an idea is ready to go. Idea is ready to go. Okay. So you can see here's the title, and then you can see a little description, which is kind of nice, especially if you have a team building on things. I know this automation would work, but I'm going to keep it off for now. Now, the nice thing about this automation is that it's pretty much the same thing as creating the script doc, especially if you don't have much of a template here in this Google Doc creation piece, right? So if it's pretty empty, what you can do actually is go to the 3 dots and actually just duplicate it. So I'm going to do the same thing and then make the the edits that we need to. So script doc creation. Same status is I still want that script to be made. Do this, and instead of prep doc, right, I want it to be script doc. And that's all set. And then I don't want it to be in the prep doc field. I want that to be in the script doc field. So I'll do this. And then that same URL, or this new URL, it's mapping to this one. So I would generate a preview, and then we'd be all set. So those are the 2 automations that we need in this particular content calendar template. So now we're all good. It didn't run it, but it would run it. It would create links here. So for now, I'm just gonna put like linkedin.com, and I'll put google.com for this one. So that way they are colored. So there's that. And then what I'll do is actually hide the fields. So I'll hide them because we don't need these anymore. What these are the same links here in these colors. So that's really, really nice. And that is the entire content table here in this content calendar template. Let's move on to the second and actually last table that we have. We only have 2 tables in this template, and this one's relatively super easy comparatively to this content table, and that is this keywords table. So what I'm gonna do is create an empty table, and this keywords table is super simple. So it'll be keywords, and I'm just gonna delete all of this because we don't need it. Delete it. All right. And this is really good, especially maybe you're thinking about maybe writing a blog or being more like search focused on YouTube. So if you're using TubeBuddy and things like that, you can do that. So instead of it being name, I want it to be actually the keyword. And then I want it to be score. So maybe this is like a score from TubeBuddy or from Ubersuggest, or whatever SEO tool you might be using. You actually can put the score in here. So that'll be a number. And then you can do actually the nice thing about this, right? It's gonna be 2 tables, and you can get more complex with this if you want. But what you can do with keywords is actually link it to your content. So what I'll do is actually create a linked record to content, linking multiple records, because sometimes, right, you might go for the same keyword with multiple types of content, potentially, especially if it's like a really important keyword that you want. So I'll just say content piece or content pieces and do that. And we won't add any lookup fields, but you could do that very easily. Now, when we go back here, right, is you can see actually there's 3 hidden fields, and it hides keywords naturally. So I'm going to turn this on because I want to be able to see what keywords are we actually going for. And again, this is part of like the data analysis. Eventually, maybe do like an annual review or a quarterly review. You can see which keywords you were going for and which ones panned out and which ones didn't, which is really, really cool. So those are the 2 main tables that we are going to create for this Airtable content calendar template. It's super simple, but it's really, really nice, especially because you can batch content. It creates this whole place where everything is in one place. Now, to really make this robust, where you can add different fields, like maybe there's more data you want to have in here, but really I think where the beauty of Airtable is in views. So there's a few views I want to create in these tables. Now, in this content table, what I want to create is a few different ones. So one will be YouTube. Another one will be Instagram. Another one is usually ideas. And then another one is a calendar, full calendar view. So post date, and then end date I'm not going to worry about. Okay, so there's these 4 different views. Now what I like to do is actually filter by which, what platform are they going on. So what I'm going to do is platform, and then has any of YouTube on this one, right? So you can see this one's staying because it's on YouTube. Now, if I had a bunch of content right in here, what I could do is actually group it by the status. So I'll have it do it by naturally, right? So there's all this content for YouTube that would be on deck, and there'd be like a writing and an editing. Then I can see really quickly what's in the pipeline for YouTube and like what's on deck, what's writing, and it just gives me a nice clean snapshot of what's happening for our YouTube content pipeline. We're gonna do the same thing then for Instagram, and you can do the same thing for TikTok too. So it'll be added condition, platform, Instagram, and then group by status. Okay, there's nothing in there because we only have one piece of content in this entire content calendar. Now, ideas. Now, this is one of my most powerful views for me, at least when it comes to creating content, because again, just like if I'm maybe on a run or I'm driving somewhere and I have that would be a really cool idea. I can maybe after I'm done driving or I'm on a run, I'm at a straight line or something. I can type really quickly in this Airtable base. I'll be like, hey, this is an idea of like, this Airtable content calendar piece, or I'm working on this is a, whatever Airtable Notion video, Webflow video I can just put ideas right here. And even if that idea sucks, it's not a big deal because I'll just tag it with an idea status and then it'll just live in the Airtable. So maybe in 6 months, I'm like, you know what, that actually would fit better in this content strategy now than it did 6 months ago. So I'm not separating like all my different ideas and then content that's actually being created. Everything is in one place. But to do that, what I want to do is actually add a condition where status is either on deck, it has any of, idea, or on deck. So you can see on deck would be in here, and then I would have like a whole 30, 40 different ideas. So that way, when I'm actually planning my content calendar, I can see what ideas I have in here and then just start picking dates of ooh, that fits. And then I can coordinate all my different ideas that I didn't have to make up on the spot into one, the next 3-4 weeks. And I'm all set to go in terms of creating content, maybe for the next quarter, the next year, whatever it might be. So create a really nice view for your ideas and then create different views as you're actually creating content. I highly, highly recommend that. Now, if you're more of a visual person and want to see what content's coming out in the next few weeks or whatnot, what you can do is actually this full calendar, and you can filter it. You can make colors and everything else. What you could do is actually color by the status. So you can see it naturally picks up status. So because this is on deck, it's blue. And then it would just use the same color coding that's on that status field. You can change this to whatever you want, but that's a pretty natural status colors for what you got going on. So that is the basic views that I would highly recommend in this content table here in this content calendar template. The last part of this is this keywords table and what views we want to actually create. So you can do is what I like to do is actually do a full table of what's happening on everything. So this would be keywords in total, right? It'd be keywords I've used, keywords that I'm hey, that'd be interesting to go after or whatever it might be. And then the last view that I want to create is actually a view where it shows me what keywords I've actually used. So to do that, I would create a new grid view and I would call it keywords used. And you could create a different status that says, hey, this keyword's in the pipeline, whatever it might be, but actually I would pair it with the content piece. So if I've already used it, right, there's a content piece that's actually tagged with it. So to do that, if it's the keywords used, it would be keyword content pieces that means, right, that it's not empty. So it'd be not empty, and then all that disappears because all of those fields were empty. So that's a nice way to kind of eliminate some fields, especially if your content calendar is getting really lengthy or this particular table is getting really big. You can eliminate some fields just by using the empty or not empty field, which is really cool. That's this entire content calendar template, and I hope it's really helpful. That's how you can build a content calendar in Airtable. If you want to grab a free copy of this Airtable template, you can do so via the link down in the description. If you found this video helpful, I would love it if you can give it a like. And if you're looking for more content like this video, you can check out other videos on this channel like this one here.